Good morning, Hawthorne and Sycamore. It's so lovely to see you all again today. I'm going to read the next part of our class reader, Skylarks War by Hilary and McKay. Could you please make sure that you either contact me or Mrs. Byfield by Friday just to let us know how you're all doing? And it'd be great if you could send us an email so we know where to send your reports to. Right, chapter 4, let's find out about Rupert. Cornwall was theirs for the summer. And the best part of all, better than the turquoise sea, the white gulls and the gold and purple moor, better than the tangled garden, the scutter of rabbits in the early morning, and their dark footprints in the silver dew, better than the bounty of the corner's kitchen, apple dumplings, brown eggs, saffron cakes and raspberry tart, better even than Lucy, their grandmother pony who pulled the pony trap, was that in Cornwall was Rupert. Their cousin, Rupert. Nearly 7 years older than Clary, 3.5 years older than Peter. Their fathers were brothers. Clary and Peter had never met Rupert's parents. Last seen waving to 3-year-old Rupert from the boat train, now, according to grandfather, living in Calcutta, avoiding their responsibilities. Rupert spent his holidays in Cornwall and term times away at boarding school. Having endured the desertion of his parents, a Cornish winter when a gale was so strong it blew him off the cliff, a Christmas of scarlet fever and innumerable years of compulsory education, he was assumed to be indestructible and allowed to do what he liked. Rupert had a curving smile and lazy green gold eyes, completely unlike Peter's wary grey glance. His jokes were the best, his tennis balls flew the highest, his stories charmed the most listeners, cats strolled over and sat beside him, dogs regarded him with comradely affection, the sunlight tanned him apricot gold and the rain rolled off him in silver drops. He was recklessly kind. For Clary, he was the centre of summer, the light in the water, the warmth in the wind, the welcome back song of the bee humming moor. Rupert was on the station platform when they arrived, and a moment later Clary had jumped down to be swept into his annual hug of greeting. Rupert hugged Peter too, which Clary was never allowed to do. "Get off," said Peter grumpily. He considered himself far too old for hugs, and he was not feeling very fond of his cousin that summer. In the last few weeks, his father's mutters and hints had resolved into a family conspiracy to send him away to school. To Rupert's boarding school, which, as their grandparents had pointed out to Peter, had been the making of his cousin. "I don't need making," Peter had protested, but his father clearly thought he was wrong. He had actually invited him for a walk to talk over the matter, the longest conversation he had ever attempted with his son. Peter had been marched up and down windy streets listening to the tale of how Rupert had begun school as a miserable 7-year-old and become, through the influence of education, the successful and confident person he was now. "I'm not going and you can't make me," Peter said, every time he had a chance to speak. These words had had the good effect of making his father walk twice as fast and at a speed where it was impossible to talk. Unfortunately, as soon as he calmed down a little, he began once more. "I'm not going and you can't make me," Peter repeated minutously in the next available pause, and off they would go again. This continued for nearly 2 hours, and then quite suddenly, Peter's father had spun round, turned into a side street and, without another glance, vanished. Peter had arrived home to find Clary alone in the house, hovering by the front door and worrying. "Where is father?" "Who cares?" asked Peter, pushing past her and stomping inside. "What did he want?" "To get rid of me." Peter marched up the stairs to his bedroom and slammed the door very hard. He had been in a slamming mood ever since. Ignoring his father, snubbing Clary, hunched and miserable on the train, he blamed at least half his boarding school troubles on his cousin, who had survived far too long and well. Now here he was, Rupert himself, behaving as if none of it was his fault. "Sick much?" asked Rupert kindly. "Sick much?" asked Rupert kindly, ignoring Peter's growls. "No." "3 bags," said Clary cheerfully. "None on the floor this time. Who's coming to meet us?" "Grandfather," said Rupert, as he led the way out of the station. "But we have to wait for a bit. He dropped me off and went into town. He'll be back in a few minutes to collect you." "Is he all right?" asked Clary. "And our grandmother and Lucy?" "Of course they are. And are you well as well?" "Don't I look all right?" asked Rupert. Clary nodded, not wanting to say anything that would make Peter even more cross, but her eyes shone so brightly she might as well have spoken. "You should just stay on Cornwall with Rupert if you like him so much," said Peter, sour with jealousy. "I don't suppose father would care." "You would, though," said Rupert, laughing. "You couldn't manage without Clary. What about if I come and live at your house instead?" "Could you?" asked Clary. "Of course. You wait and see. I'll turn up one day and bash on the door, and you'll all hide behind the curtains to pretend to be out, like grandmother does when the vicar's wife comes round." Clary laughed. Grandmother and the vicar's wife were old enemies. Church on Sundays was brightened by the after-service battles. Even Peter usually enjoyed the duels in front of the altar vases, the nodding hats and the vicious retweakings of each other's lilies and ferns. Today, however, Peter wasn't in a good mood for family jokes. He stayed sulking until the grandfather arrived. He had his camera with him and insisted on taking photographs, with many orders such as, "Clary, please look at the camera, not Lucy." "Rupert, good heavens, not quite such a buffoon. Stand up straight, Peter." "Very well, if that's how you want to appear." "Clary, you're squinting." But at last he was satisfied, and they were allowed to climb into the pony trap, and there was the long road out of the house ahead of them, and then their grandparents' granite house between the moorlands and the sea, and they had arrived. "Now don't go rushing off," said their grandfather. "If your grandmother is down for a nap, I'm sure she'll want a word." Peter groaned. Grandmother's words were sometimes difficult to hear. She told the truth, no matter how painful. That was all very amusing when she was telling the vicar's wife that her roses were half dead and the vases smelt like duck pond. The vicar's wife was a tough old lady and would point out with equal truth that Grandmother's sweet peas were crawling with green flies. It was less funny when she remarked that Rupert's parents had probably forgotten he existed, or when she hoped Peter actually was brighter than he looked. She also had a way of gazing at Clary and sighing that made Clary hang her head. Yet, in her way, she was fond of them all, and now here she was, smiling in welcome, taking Peter's hand, greeting Clary with a kind, if stately, kiss. "Here you are again. How quickly the summer's come around. Well, you know where your beds are, and your supper is already waiting for you in the morning room. Keep out of the kitchen, please. They asked me to remind you that they really don't want you in there. Clary dear, your dress. You'll find fresh towels. Oh, sorry. Clary, dear, your dress. Don't let me see it again. Straight up to the bathroom, please. You'll find fresh towels and a new soap. And then put something suitable on. And don't forget to brush that hair. Off you go. Wait, please, Peter." Peter, who had got half out the door after Clary, paused glaring. "A decision has been made about school for you, Peter, for your own good, entirely, by the people who care about you most. I'm not." Clary, in the same dress with her hair still unbrushed and clean, not yet having made her way up the stairs to the soap, fell back through the door and flung her arms around Peter. "He's been very ill in the train," she said fiercely. "You're not to tell him off." "Stop it, Clary," said Peter, disentangling himself. "Don't fuss. Go and get clean. Like Grandmother told you. I don't mind where I go to school. I'm used to it. But I don't now. I expect I'll enjoy it." "Good man," exclaimed Grandfather, smiling like a harbour seal. But Clary retreated backwards across the room and then went to find Rupert. "He's pretending he doesn't mind," she told him. "He might as well," said Rupert unhelpfully. "They won't let him off, so why fight it? He used to say he would die if he'd had to go. People don't die at boarding school, do they?" "Never," said Rupert. "Well, hardly ever. Stop worrying about it. Come on, we'll go and catch Lucy, and you can see how long you can stay on." Clary fell off Lucy several times and cheered up. After all, they were back in Cornwall with summer all before them. The Shallows' nest was where it had all been. Her bedroom floor dipped and rose like the deck of a ship, and the secret treasure box she had hidden up the chimney was still intact. Clary counted her hoard. 12 pale pink cowrie shells, a lock of Lucy's mane, a rock containing crystals of gold, a very small penknife with a pearly handle and a blade that didn't cut. Before she went to bed, she added the gold birthday sovereign and a white heart-shaped stone that Rupert had produced, saying, "Look what I found on the beach for you." "That's nice." The new unknown Peter remarked, who would have previously said, "That's quartz," and then he would have gone to his grandfather if he needed any help with putting away the pony trap for the night. Clary had looked after him, absolutely baffled. In church the next day, Peter's transformation continued. Clary observed him praying as he meant it, putting a whole precious shilling in the collection plate. Was so shocked she took it out again and smuggled it back into his pocket, and asked the vicar about the age of the font, which turned out to be 16th century. "I thought it might be," said Peter. "My second grandson," said the grandfather to the vicar, his hands on Peter's back. "Very promising scholar." "Thank you, sir," said Peter, steady as a rock. He had taken it to calling him grandfather, sir. It was delightful to hear him. "He can't possibly keep it up," whispered Rupert to Clary, but at Sunday lunch, the once-a-week meal with the grandparents, Peter showed no sign of flagging. During the course of roast beef and jam sponge, he correctly identified a landscape grandmother had painted in her youth, demonstrated an intelligent knowledge of the headlines in the day's papers, retrieved Clary's napkin from under the table and said at the end, "Come on, Rupert, we'll take the plates out to the kitchen." After that, he vanished, until Clary tracked him down reading under the apple trees. He smiled when he saw her and called, "Hello, coming to join me? That'll be nice." "Peter, please stop it." "Stop what?" Being so nice and kind. I'm sorry, aren't I usually nice and kind? Of course you're not, said Clary, beating with her fist. Peter flopped on his back, laughing, and said, you know what, this tree would be a really good place for a hammock. A hammock? You could stretch it right across between those two big branches. Or would it damage the apples? I don't see why it should if we're careful. I'll ask Rupert what he thinks. Would you use it, Clary, if I fix one up for you? No, I wouldn't, shouted Clary, and ran sobbing into the house and collided straight away with her grandfather, who said, hey, what's this? Nothing. Peter. What about Peter? He said the apple tree would be a really good place for a hammock, said Clary, rather damply. Yes, go on. If it didn't damage the apples, I failed to see cause for tears, said her grandfather. However, I'm too old for tree climbing. Tell him to ask Rupert to give him a hand. He is asking Rupert. It's beyond me what the problem is then, said her grandfather. Unless you're ill. Are you not feeling well? You better go and have a word with your grandmother. Clary shook her head, but later she overheard him having a word himself. Surprised it's not the girl who causes all the problems we hear about at home. The boy's no trouble at all. If you ask me, his father's no idea how to handle him. Great improvement on last year. Perfectly charming. Peter was perfectly charming all the next day too. It's being here, thought Clary, trying to explain it to herself, and not arguing all the time with father, and having so much space outside. Outside was limitless. Gardens and fields, moorlands and seas. There were no rules, only consequences. The year before, Rupert had picked up an adder which had bitten him and left him with a very sore arm for a week. They had all three regretted eating the mushrooms that they had confidently gathered. Clary had freed a dozen trapped bullocks that were pushing out a gate and then could not be prevented from following her home. You were lucky not to be trampled, said the farmer who came to collect them from the remains of her grandparents' front lawn. I know, said Clary, still trembling. How else can they learn? Asked her grandfather after all these happenings. Can we follow them about the countryside saying, don't touch a snake, leave the bullocks, those are toadstools, you foolish child, at our age? No. Whichever it was, the freedom or the peace, Peter's transformation continued. On the third day of his new personality, he asked to borrow grandfather's binoculars to watch trestles over the moors. If you break them, I'll flog you, said Peter's grandfather, but he handed them over quite cheerfully, Peter being his new favourite person. Thank you, sir, said Peter. Would you like my bike too? Asked Rupert, but Peter said no, he'd probably be walking most of the time. This did not happen. 5 shilling ticket. What Peter did, after sitting out with grandfather's binoculars and his wonderful new manners, was buy a shilling ticket for a branch-line train that ran through the valley at the bottom of his grandparents' gardens, and then stop off it as it rattled and puffed its way across the moor. Nobody knew this for ages and ages, not until the return train went past and someone happened to notice him lying by the tracks. I thought he was dead until he raised his arm, said the passenger, explaining afterwards, lying there, half buried in the brackens, white as a sheet. Whatever happened? No one could answer that. Peter was retrieved by a stretcher, transported to the nearest town. Peter was retrieved by a stretcher, transported to the nearest town by train, hurried to the local hospital, diagnosed with bruises, shock, and multiple fractures of the left leg, knocked out with chloroform, woken screaming, dosed with morphine, and very luckily identified by his grandfather's name inside his binocular case. When he finally came round and was well enough to talk, he said he couldn't remember anything after leaving the house. 2 days afterwards, he recalled getting on a train, and as the days passed, more of the journey came back to him. I remember standing up, he said cautiously, and I think I opened the door to look at something. He was back home with his grandparents now after nearly a week in hospital, propped up in bed with his leg in a plaster from heel to hip and bruises as purple as plums. You might have died, said Clary. Then what? Died, said Peter scornfully. I didn't even break the binoculars. And you hate trains. Why did you go on one when you didn't have to? I found a shilling in my pocket and I thought I might as well. Oh, Peter, well, Clary, what? I put it there after church that first Sunday. Well then, stop blaming me for everything. It's half your fault. Rupert, who was leaning against the doorframe, looking thoughtfully at Peter, said, Oi! Why did you have to open the train door? Persisted Clary. Couldn't you have just opened the window if you weren't feeling well? Look, snapped Peter, for since he had so illogically opened the door of a moving train, his perpetual irritation with the world had returned as if it had never been lost. Who said I wasn't feeling well? I was on a train, I got off the train, the end. But the train was going, not very fast, and you just stepped out, on purpose. It was much higher above the track than I realised. What was it you saw anyway? Peter did not reply, and Clary saw that his eyes were closed. He had turned his face towards his bedroom wall, and she noticed how shabby his old striped pyjamas looked, how limp his thin brown hair was. Are you hot? She asked, reaching out a hand to check his forehead. The doctors had told them that he mustn't be hot. It meant infection from the broken bones. No, Peter pushes her hand away. I'm just tired. Clear off and leave me alone. I'm supposed to be resting. I didn't get much sleep last night. He yawned a large fake yawn and closed his eyes. You're an awful actor, said Peter, grinning. Just get out, howled Peter, sitting up furiously. Ah, no, I've yanked it again. Clear off with the rotten questions. It's your fault. It's all your blasted fault. Hell! He pulled a pillow over his face, but not before Clary had glimpsed the glitter of tears. Peter, she began, but from under the pillow came a tremendous, angry growl. Pete, we're going, said Rupert, reaching out for Clary and steering her towards the door. Leave you in peace. I'll be back in a while in case you need anything. Come on, Clary. But let him rest. Out in the garden, Clary said, poor Peter. I don't believe he saw anything special from the train. I expect he was sick, like always, and couldn't get to the window down, and then he must have fallen. Yes, perhaps, agreed Rupert. And now he's miserable, and his whole summer is spoiled. Do you always worry about him this much? Asked Rupert, amused. Yes, of course I do. Well, don't. He'll soon be able to get about a bit, and then he'll cheer up. Stop fussing him, though. No more questions. We'll find something ordinary to talk about. What does he like to do at home? Does he paint things like you do? No, Clary shook her head. He likes looking at things up in books, she added, after some thought. We'll find him some things to look up then. We'll go foraging for mysteries. Now, I'll fetch my bike, and you can ride in the crossbars, and we'll whiz into town for ice cream. And bring some back for Peter, said Clary. It would melt, said Rupert, and then seeing her disappointed face, added, we'll bring lemons to make him lemonade, and watched it shine again. Clary took the lemons to the kitchen and shooed away while the lemonade was made. To pass the time, she went hunting outside. Very soon, she found a great number of things that could be looked up in books, including 2-headed dandelions, a crystal of pink quartz, a miniature wasp nest as light as a paper shell, and a metallic blue feather barred with black. I found something too, said Rupert, and held up a yellow sheep's skull with grey teeth still intact. Yuck, said Clary. Nonsense, he'll love it. These teeth are loose, he can pull them out and stare into the holes. It's horrible, said Clary, but Rupert was right and Peter did love it. So much it inspired Rupert to search more excitements. We could start a museum, Rupert said, emptying pockets of stones and seashells onto Peter's bed. And Peter, who liked nothing better than organising things into straight lines and lists, began cataloguing at once. This was how Peter's recovery began, although the doctors explained that he would be on crutches for months. Even after that, they told him his left leg would never straighten properly at his knee and would be at least an inch shorter than his right. I don't suppose that will matter much, said Clary hopefully when she heard this news. Nobody will notice. They'll say I'll need to wear special shoes, said Peter, built up and do exercises. They said they nearly took it off. Peter! So I suppose I've been lucky. He was so calm about it that Grandfather said gruffly, good lad. The grandparents treated the whole affair in much the same way as they had the misadventures of the past. Clary had learned to leave field gates closed, and Rupert no longer picked up snakes. Mushrooms were gathered with caution. In future, Peter would move more carefully with train doors. Peter did not complain very much. The pain became less until it was just an uncomfortable stiffness and mostly an ignorable ache. Quite early on this summer, it was decided that he could not be sent to boarding school with Rupert that September. What a pity, said Rupert blandly. Yes, agreed, said Peter. And the next chapter is called Swimming Lessons. And I wonder who wants swimming lessons. And that is where I'm going to leave it for today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you tomorrow for the next part of our story. Take care, Hawthorne and Sycamore. Bye.